Hello and welcome to the premiere installment of Around the Valley, where we discuss national and local sports topics on a weekly basis with a rotating panelist of guests. The way the show works is we have 8 topics to debate, and at the end, I will arbitrarily and for no particular reason decide on a winner and give them 30 seconds of rant time, as they are in fact the people's champion. I'm your host, Will Weir, and today with me we have 2 guests. First, we have Dan Mangan, a graduate of UMass and a writer for SumoSkinny.com. Dan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, Will.
And to my direct right, not to be alarmed, he is a 0.0001% owner of the Green Bay Packers and a senior at UMass, John Walsh. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Not a problem. So let's get right into it. It's been a busy week in sports, last couple of weeks in sports, especially in the NFL, where we have 3 main topics to discuss. First, let's begin with the Saints Bounty Program, an illegal program run under former defensive coordinator Greg Williams, in which players were rewarded for knocking players out of games. Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, has come down with some pretty heavy fines that include the suspension of Greg Williams indefinitely, suspension of head coach Sean Payton for the entire season, as well as GM Mickey Loomis for the first 8 games of the season, a forfeiture of their second-round picks in this year and next year's draft, as well as a $500,000 fine. Now, my question to you guys is, what are your thoughts on the punishment? Is this fair or unfair, or is this kind of what you expected Roger Goodell to do when he came down with his decision?
I think it's definitely fair. You can't have a bounty to purposely injure players. It's not about the money. It's not about what actually happened. It's the intent to injure players. Like, you can't be in the game. There's nothing for it. And Goodell needed to come down hard just so it won't happen again. So it's definitely fair. The only thing I'm surprised about in the aftermath is the fact that Sean Payton's really hasn't been he hasn't showed any remorse. He's been out there publicly trying to get a new coach. He's trying to get everything set for his team before he's suspended on April 1st. But he hasn't really apologized. He's I don't know, not really remorseful.
I agree with Dan. The punishment was kind of unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before, but at the same time, the crime was unlike anything we'd ever seen. So I think the Saints deserve it. The only thing I'm concerned with is with Peyton being suspended. I'm not sure how big a deal that actually is, because does the NFL have a way of preventing him and Drew Brees from talking on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's very true. It's very unsure about whether the cell phone communication works throughout the season. And that's what I want to talk about next is, how does this impact their season directly upcoming? We know they're forfeiting a pick, but we know they're without their coach for the entire season, and there are also player suspensions, which are still looming and have yet to be announced. So what is the outlook that you guys see on the Saints this season and going forward? Clearly a city that kind of the entire world has rallied around since Hurricane Katrina and then leading them to the Super Bowl. They've really been a rallying point for the NFL. This kind of tarnishes their legacy a little bit. So what do you guys see for them in this upcoming year and the years to come after?
I think Sean Payton's biggest strength as a coach was his play calling, and being with Drew Brees for that long, I think Drew Brees is mature enough and smart enough to call his own plays. So offensively, I think they're going to be the same potent offense that we're used to seeing. Depending with the suspensions, defensively, they could really be hurt. I heard talks of them maybe staggering the suspension, so not all the players are suspended for the same games. If they do that, it won't be as big a crime, but if they were to punish Vilma and all their linebackers for the same amount of games at the same time, it could be just a lost season for them.
Yeah. I think Vilma's definitely going to get suspended the longest. He might lose half the year. So
he's on record as in part of the emails for their investigation saying that he put a $10,000 bounty on Brett Favre from their championship game a few years ago.
Yeah, he's definitely going to get suspended the longest, maybe half the year. But in terms of the morale, I think they're going to rally for it the first half of the season. But I think in the long term, they're gonna end up falling off.
Okay, so as I mentioned, there was several big topics going on in the NFL, so we're gonna drop that. We're gonna move on to the next one now. Peyton Manning. Usually this would be the first topic we have. But clearly the bounty program is it's unheard, nothing we've ever dealt with before. But neither really is this. Peyton Manning, in the prime of his career, 14 years with the Indianapolis Colts, has been released because of the Colts having the number 1 overall pick, in which they will most likely select Andrew Luck out of the University of Stanford. Now, Peyton Manning had his own tour to figure out where he wanted to play. Came down to specifically 3 teams: the Broncos, the Titans, and the 49ers. He ended up choosing the Broncos. My first question before we divulge into his actual choices, was this the right choice for him, John?
Personally, if I was him, I would have gone to the 49ers because the defense is probably the best in the NFL, and offensively, I think he's used to a great tight end, and in San Francisco, they have one of the best tight ends in the league, and I think he could make Crabtree a phenomenal wide receiver.
You know, the media keeps using the word comfortable, like he chose the place that was most comfortable for him. I don't think that's what it's about. I think he chose the place that gave him the most power to run his offense. Like, if you look at the personnel of the 49ers, you got Frank Gore, Crabtree, Ted Ginn Jr. They just signed Randy Moss and Manningham from the Giants. Like, they're loaded on offense, and they have one of the best defenses in the league already. So, like, if you're trying to win a Super Bowl this year, he probably should have gone to the 49ers, but Jim Harbaugh probably wouldn't have given him as much power on the offense as Elway's going to give him, and John Fox.
Well, now, so his choice has been made. He will play for the Denver Broncos next year. And taking a look back last year, clearly Tebow mania took over the city of Denver, took over the NFL, practically the world. And despite only having an 8-8 record, they did win the division and won a playoff game against the Steelers before being eliminated the following week. So how much does Peyton Manning's impact really have on a team that was already 8-8 with what some would say is subpar quarterback, although for whatever reason, he still captivated everyone in America?
I mean, if he stays healthy, he's a 10-game automatic winner no matter where he is. Like, the Colts last year they win 2 games, and if he was there, they probably would have won 8 or 10 games. So I think they'll make the playoffs, but I don't think they have Super Bowl contention.
I think you made a good point. The biggest key is for him to stay healthy. No one really knows what's going to happen the first time he gets hit. But last year, the Denver Broncos had 20 passing touchdowns. In Peyton Manning's rookie season, he threw for 26 passing touchdowns, and he's never thrown for less than that. So obviously, their offense is going to be a lot stronger. That division's always weak. So I think they'll easily win the division again. And if that defense can play as they were only the 20th ranked defense last year, but if they can step it up maybe a little bit, I think they'll be a good playoff team.
Okay, before we move on to our next topic, give me a prediction for a record and how far they go in the postseason if they make it that far.
I think they'll have 11 wins, and definitely their home playoff game, they'll win that.
Okay.
They go 10 or 11 wins, make the playoffs, and either win first game or lose first game, but no more than one playoff win.
Okay, well, the subsequent subplot to this whole story is, as I mentioned earlier, Tim Tebow, the fascination of America, was on the Broncos last year, came on, played fairly well, went 7-4 despite having very below average numbers, but really inspired that team to victory. And so now he gets traded to the Jets after the signing of Manning. And to be honest, this move is confusing to a lot of people. The media circus that already is New York is now overcrowded with the media circus that is Tim Tebow. So combine the two, I'm not quite sure what they have. What do you make of this move, Dan?
I think it makes absolutely no sense on the Jets side because they just signed Sanchez to a 3-year, $14 million a year deal. They're trying to. He's been awful the past few years. He's declining. They're trying to get him to be the franchise quarterback. And then you bring in Tebow, who everyone loves for whatever reason. Like people love him. So if Sanchez goes out there the first game, throws a couple of picks and loses, the crowd's going to be going nuts for Tebow, and then the whole thing that happened in Denver is going to happen again in New York, and it's going to be multiplied because it's New York. So I think they're going to implode at some point.
I agree with Dan. They were an 8-8 team last year, so was Tebow, so I don't see them getting any better. Their offense, the reason they said they struggled last year was because of the egos clashing, so specifically Santonio Holmes and people saying Mark Sanchez wasn't trying hard enough. So like you said, his first interception, his first turnover, his first home loss, I think everyone's going to be asking for Tebow. And with Rex Ryan's ego, I don't think there's enough room in New York for all of them to stay for the whole season.
Yeah, the last thing they needed was to have more media attention. With Rex Ryan saying he's going to win all these Super Bowls, and he's just always on ESPN doing something stupid.
No, one thing Jets management has vehemently gone out of their way to say, whether it be Rex Ryan or Woody Johnson or GM Mike Tenenbaum, is that Mark Sanchez is their starter. Tim Tebow is the backup. Tim Tebow will be used as a football player, as in the Wildcats, at which, for the most part, 2 years ago, the Jets ran second most in the league. Last year, play calling way down on the Wildcat offense. Do you see that as an actual possibility that Tebow remains throughout the season, barring injury, as straight a Wildcat quarterback, a mix-up of sorts for the Jets?
I think they were very successful 2 years ago, like you said, because Brad Smith is just a very versatile player, and he played quarterback in high school or college, so they had to respect him as a passer. I think the first time they call the Wildcat inside the red zone and Tebow gets a rushing touchdown, they're going to want Tebow to be out there all the time. So I don't think that could help either.
I mean, it's all about Sanchez being successful. If he plays well enough to win and exceeds people's expectations on what he's going to do, then they'll be fine. But just having Tebow back there, just in case, if anything, if Sanchez doesn't play well, it's going to go bad. He has one bad game, it's over.
So what's your guys' over-under? How many games Tim Tebow will start this season at quarterback?
I think he'll probably start 8 games, maybe more.
I think Sanchez is done after 4, so what is that?
12 games.
12, 13.
Not quite mathematicians on this show, but we make it work.
Isn't there 17 games in the season now? No?
No, 16. You get 1 bye week.
Right.
That's all right. But so if you guys think that's what the amount of games Tebow will play, what is the final record for the Jets?
I think they'll probably be worse than they were last year, so 500 at best. I think Rex Ryan's going to be fired halfway through the year.
Okay.
I think they'll go 7-9 because the Bills are going to be better than the Jets this year, I think.
Okay. Well, wrapping up our segment there on the NFL, we're going to move to a more local topic, as here right in Amherst, our own UMass Minutemen played last night in the NIT Final Four against Stanford in Madison Square Garden, unfortunately falling to them a 74-64 defeat. But for the Minutemen, it was a monumental season, having a 10-win improvement over last year, as Coach Derek Kellogg has improved his win total from 12 to 15 to 25 this season, and really giving the UMass Minutemen some hope. So my question for you guys is, what have your thoughts been on this NIT run, and what does it mean for the program going forward in the future, starting with you, Dan?
The NIT run is huge just for TV time. Any program that's trying to get back in the national scene, if someone's flicking around and they see UMass and stop and watch a few minutes, you just get recognition with the board, with the NCAA tournament board. So the NIT run is good, but I mean their losses all year long. They had a couple of bad losses to some bad teams, and they had some losses to some good teams that they should have won. And their losses just show how young they are. There's no ceiling for this team moving forward over the next 2 years.
I agree with Dan. We all went to the game a month back when they beat Xavier, and Xavier just barely lost to Baylor last week. So I think they're moving in the right direction. Kellogg's doing a phenomenal job every year, making the team better, and they're only losing it's their starting center, so it's a key position. But I think next season they'll be even better than they were this year.
So what would you guys assess as your main goals that Derek Kellogg, the rest of his staff, this entire team that's essentially coming back in full form, minus Sean Carter, what are some of the specific things that they need to improve to get to that next level to make the NCAA tournament and get out of the NIT?
Well, I think they're going to make the NCAA tournament next year, first of all. And, I mean, they just need to play better teams at the beginning of the year when they're playing out-of-conference games, because they played a pretty bad schedule this year. And, first of all, to get into the tournament, you need to play better teams because you need to have a good strength of schedule. But that'll also prepare them for the tournament, too, to actually make a run.
I think that's a good point on the schedule aspect. On a specific team aspect, I think offensively is just really where they need to improve. Defensively, they're phenomenal. They do a great press. But offensively, their decision-making on when to shoot threes and just their offense in general isn't really smooth. So I think if they improve there, they'll be all set.
Clearly, at least the statistical leader and even emotional leader on the court for this team was Chaz Williams, the sophomore point guard out of Brooklyn. What do you think his ceiling is as a player? Is he someone that can lead UMass to a Sweet 16? Does he have that type of drive in him?
I think as a senior, depending on how the two new centers are next year and moving forward, his senior year, I think he can go past the Sweet 16 if he develops. He's in such a raw talent like he goes so fast sometimes. Like he goes too fast for his own good. If he can like hone his skills and like use his quickness and like his shooting ability and all that, he can be an unbelievable player.
I agree with Dan. I think this year it's easy. He was the heart and soul of the team. You could tell the team runs the way he runs. Like last night, for instance, against Stanford, he had a couple turnovers in the first half and was a little out of control. And then we made our run when he calmed down and he started scoring the basketball. So in the NCAA tournament, as we've seen every single year, a hot point guard can lead you as far as they can take you. So
Clearly the future for UMass looks bright. But now let's turn our attention to the big dance and the brackets, the actual brackets, although I'm doubting anyone filled out their NIT brackets this year. So now we've come down to the Final Four. It's been an interesting tournament so far. For the first time ever, two 15 seeds upset two number 2 seeds in the same day, a monumental day for the NCAA. But overall, the big boys are what have really made it to the final dance here, where Kentucky will battle Louisville in a rematch of their longtime rivalry known as the Bluegrass Battle, in which Kentucky won 69-62 earlier this season. And on the other side of the bracket, Kansas will have a rematch with Ohio State, whom they beat 78-67 earlier this year, although I might add was without their All-American center, Jared Sullinger. So gentlemen, as we take a look at this tournament, first of all, what have been your thoughts on the way this tournament has played out as compared to recent years where we've had Butler and VCU making extraordinary runs to the Final Four, John?
I think you're seeing the parity in college football where just you never know what's going to happen. The tournament, crazy things always happen, but especially this year, as you said, the two 15 seeds. I don't think anyone picked that. If a couple whistles went the other way for Syracuse or UNC Asheville, I think we almost saw the first 16 seed win. So I think you're seeing just more parity and just equal teams making the tournament every year.
Yeah, the talent in the 16 through 12 teams over the past couple of years has gone up exponentially over the past 4 years, and like you never see a 12 through 16 really like make a huge upset, or maybe a 12, but 13 through 16. They've been awful up until like 3 years ago, and it just says a lot about the smaller programs making a run.
All right, well, let's talk about this upcoming weekend, the Final Four in New Orleans. Let's talk about the first matchup, Kentucky-Louisville. Anthony Davis, most likely the number 1 pick in the draft. The Kentucky Wildcats, led by John Calipari, former coach here at UMass, take on Louisville. Rick Pitino, a former player here at UMass. Louisville kind of came on strong late, won the Big East tournament, and then has propelled itself clearly to the Final Four. Give me your thoughts and takes on this, and give me a winner, starting with Dan.
Yeah, well, first of all, we got two guys that I have a feeling Calipari and Pitino don't really like each other. Two shady guys going at it. But I had Louisville out pretty early, and everyone has Kentucky winning. I think like the way Louisville's been playing, they've been playing like unreal, and I smell a little bit of an upset.
You think this being
here.
a rivalry gives them a little bit of an edge?
Yeah, it's a huge edge for Louisville because if Kentucky wins this game, like they're expected to win this game.
Okay.
So everyone, if they lose this game, it's way bigger than Louisville. If Louisville loses this game, if Louisville wins this game, Calipari's not in trouble, but he's in trouble.
I agree with Dan. Like you said, like we saw with UConn last year, they got hot in the Big East tournament and carried them through. Louisville's on their way to doing the same thing. We'll see what happens. Their first matchup this year, as you said, it's only 69-62, and there's a little foul trouble for Jang, which is Louisville's center. And I think Jang and Anthony Davis both don't allow any layups. They both get around 5 blocks a game. So I think it'll be a great defensive battle. If Louisville can have their press working and maybe flush their Kentucky a little bit, you might see an upset. But I think there's just way too much talent on Kentucky's side for them to lose this game. And I think mentally, Kid Gilchrist especially and Terrence Jones starting in this tournament have come on really strong. So I see Kentucky winning this one.
Okay, let's move over to the other game. Kansas versus Ohio State, another rematch. This time, Sullinger, Robinson will get to square off face-to-face. Give me your thoughts on that game.
I think they're both interesting games, but Ohio State and Kansas are without a doubt playing the best basketball of both their seasons right now. That last game against UNC, Kansas went on the end of the game with a 12-0 run and just like solidified like a little confidence in their fans. And Ohio State, people kind of slept on them a little bit, I feel like, even though they were like a 2 seed and they're playing unbelievable. It's going to be a buzzer beater finish. I think Kansas is going to take it out with Robinson and Taylor.
I agree. I think Kansas will take it out, but I think they need to get Sullinger in foul trouble because he's playing phenomenal right now.
Okay. So that's something to look forward to this weekend in New Orleans. Next time we come on, hopefully we'll be discussing the national champion. Now, moving on to a more local professional level, we're going to take a look at 3 of the main teams here in the region, starting with the Boston Celtics, who entered tonight with a 27-22 record, a half game out of the Atlantic Division lead. And right now the Celtics are very thin up in the front court. Jermaine O'Neal gone for the season. Chris Wilcox gone for the season. They are relying on role players in Greg Steemsma and recently signed Ryan Hollins. So my thought to you guys right now is with a looming schedule that is extremely difficult, featuring games against Miami, San Antonio, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Indiana, all teams far ahead of them in the standings. What should be the Celtic and Doc Rivers' goal heading towards the end of the season as they make this playoff push?
Like you said, they got to play the Heat 3 times, and then all in a row they get the Heat, Spurs, Bulls, Pacers, 76ers, and then Heat again, all in a row. So they got 17 games left, 9 on the road. They gotta just get to the playoffs. I don't think if they need to rest some people, rest some people. You can't try to go all out and win all these games because you're not going to win all these games. And if they limp into the playoffs, they'll get swept easily.
I think their focus right now should be winning the division. It's on a nightly basis. They're going back and forth with Philadelphia, first, second. But the difference between coming in first and second would be the 4th seed in the conference or the 7th seed. So if we end up with that 7th seed, we're going to be playing Miami or Chicago in the first round. And I think that'll be a quick playoff exit for the Celtics. Whereas if we can get that 4th seed and, like you said, maybe be rested going into the playoffs, you never know with Doc Rivers and that defense. Anything can happen. So,
assuming that the Celtics will make the playoffs, can they make a run with Greg Steemsma and Ryan Hollins as their backup big men?
No. But there's 2 ways you can look at the playoff picture. If they get the 4 seed, they can probably beat the Hawks or the 5th seed, whoever they're going to play, and go to play Miami and Chicago. But they're going to be wiped, and you can say that they'll have momentum, but I don't think they can beat Miami and Chicago in a second round. I'm not saying they would beat Miami and Chicago in a first round, but if they were more fresh, I think they have a better chance.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Like you say, if we get the 4th seed, it's looking like if it were to end tomorrow, it'd be Indiana. And I think Roy Hibbert would have his way with Steemsma and Hollins because he's playing phenomenal right now. But I think the Celtics really need to aim for that 4th seed so that they can be – because they get more geared up for bigger games, as you see this year. When we play Chicago, when we play Miami, when we play the Lakers, we play our best basketball. And then we'll go out and lose to close games with Charlotte and teams like that. So,
real quickly, does this team live and die by Rajon Rondo?
Yeah, absolutely. If he gets hurt or doesn't play well, they won't win a game in the playoffs.
I think it's more of Rondo's attitude. You can tell when he goes out there looking for that triple-double or when he's not caring.
Okay. Well, now let's head on down to Fort Myers, where the Boston Red Sox are currently wrapping up their spring training. It has been a very tumultuous offseason featuring a regime change in which Bobby Valentine and Ben Cherington in as manager and GM, Theo Epstein and Terry Francona out. My question is, we all know what happened at the end of the season with the beer and the chicken and the video games and the biggest collapse in Major League history. What are you anticipating for this season? Is this a bounce back season, or is this something that goes deeper than we even know about right now, in your opinion?
I mean, they were games away from making the playoffs last year. They had a huge collapse. They got to make the playoffs this year, and I think they will. But it's all, for me, it's hinged all on Crawford. He's hurt right now, but he was not what everyone expected him to be last year. Kind of a letdown. And everyone else is going to be there. Ellsbury, Pedroia, Youkilis, Gonzo, they'll be there. But if Crawford can push him over the edge and do what we brought him here to do, then I think they'll be fine.
I think with a team like this, with a roster and a salary like this, you got to expect you got to aim for the World Series every year. That's what the Yankees are doing. That's what we have to do. We have to compete with them. So I think missing the playoffs would be tragic. And Valentin might be 1 year in and out if the team implodes like that. Because his style and his attitude is way different than Francona. We can already see that. Talking to the media and letting a lot of stuff out there that Francona, you never hear from him. So it's a completely different style, and I think we'll find out real quick if it's working for the Red Sox or not.
Yeah, I was a big Terry Francona fan, and I don't really like the Valentine media game that he plays, but I mean, if he wins, it doesn't matter.
But maybe is that a necessary thing that this team maybe needed? They've become perhaps too complacent with Terry Francona and his very player manager, very friendly manager style.
Yeah, I mean, Terry was there for a while. All things come to an end eventually, and it was good for a change. But we'll see. If Valentine wins, he'll be fine. If he doesn't win, he won't be fine.
Okay, now looking at this roster, is there any glaring weaknesses that you guys see, aside from injuries, of which Kyle Crawford should be back in an earlier part of the season? What are some glaring roster spots or areas that could be of trouble to the Red Sox throughout the season?
Well, I think roster spots that you need to focus on would maybe be catcher and shortstop, because we get a rotating shortstop circle pretty much on a yearly basis. I think Aviles he's playing well right now in spring training.
They recently just demoted their Cuban prospect, Jose Iglesias.
Yeah, so we'll see how he goes throughout the year. Maybe we'll call him up halfway through the year, see what happens there. And then I think Saltalamacchia and whoever else we have back there playing catcher, we need, because we know what we're going to get from Euclid and Pedroia. So
I think 2 or 3 months in, Iglesias will come up, and I think he'll finish the year as the starting shortstop. But they added like 3 or 4 bullpen people that are supposed to be good, but their bullpen is a bit of not a hole, but a little bit of a mystery going in.
Well, these will certainly be things for us to keep our eyes on, as the season will be starting in Detroit within the next week or so. And now moving on, let's head back to the NFL, where the Patriots in the middle of their off season. So far, they have not been huge spenders, but they have been focusing on one particular, which is wide receiver, where they have signed a bevy of players, including Brandon Lloyd to a 3-year deal, Anthony Gonzalez, and Dante Stallworth. So my question for you, where is Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick taking the direction of this team with all these signings, and also Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, the law firm, moving on to Cincinnati?
I'm very confused with the way they're going. I think Brandon Lloyd will be great for us. I think he's a great outside receiver, which is something we were lacking. But I'm not sure why we would need an Anthony Gonzalez when we have Welker, and when we play with 2 tight ends, the majority of the time we have 2 tight ends out there. Our only real weakness on offense was running back, and we let our number 1 running back go. So maybe they're planning on using Hernandez more, like we saw in the playoffs, but I thought we were going to go after some pass rushers or some cornerbacks defensively.
Yeah. With the receiver signings, we got all those guys for so cheap. They're all no-risk signings. And I think they signed them all. They're going to have a tryout in spring training, or not spring training, in the off-season camp, and like they're just going to dump. They're going to end up dumping 2 or 3 of those guys. I think maybe they're trying to do it to like light a fire under Ocho Cinco and like get him going again. But Brandon Lloyd's huge, and in terms of the defense, like you said, like everyone went nuts with their defense last year, which is such a flawed stat with the 31st defense. They were 15th in points per game. So I think their defense isn't as bad as people think.
I agree with that we tighten up in the red zone. I think one thing we really need, though, is a pass rusher, and especially with the Bills getting Mario Williams, it's almost like rubbing it in the Patriots' face.
Well, with the draft coming up in April, that'll be something for us to watch out for as the Patriots continue their off-season moves. And we've come to the conclusion of our 8 topics, and I know you guys want more, but unfortunately this is the end of the show, and it is time for me to decide who is the winner, and for no particular reason, I'm going to choose Dan Mangan. He is today's People's Champion. Take your rant time, my friend.
Just want to say that I write on sumoskinny.com, www.sumoskinny.com. It's SUMO, and I write about sports, music, and you can get all my articles. Follow me on Twitter at Dan_Mangan.
All right, thank you guys for joining us. That's our show today. We'll be back next week with even more of the goods, so please stay tuned. This has been Around the Valley. Thank you for joining us.